This woman, Serafina Vane, she literally chained my driveway shut and looked me dead in the eye, telling me I was trespassing on the mountain land my great-grandfather built with his own two hands. I swear, it was the worst decision of her pampered, privileged life. I've been gone 3 years, maybe a little longer. Spent all that time working the rigs, from the Permian Basin to the frozen hell of North Dakota, sending every dime home to Denver for Mom's memory care. Until she finally slipped away 6 months ago. Peaceful, finally free. With everything settled, I just wanted to come home to the one place I knew how to breathe again, the Shadow Creek Valley, Montana. But the home, that greeted me. It looked like a gilded magazine cover had vomited all over my childhood. Where the wild bluebells and lupins used to bloom, there were manicured lawns, stretching out like artificial green carpets, stinking of chemical fertilizer. And standing guard over it all, like some bizarre fortress, were 8 multi-million-dollar glass and steel monstrosities, the Aspen Rise Collective. And blocking the old logging road, the one my grandpa, Silas Thorne, cut in 1923, a heavy steel chain, locked, and a sign declaring, "Private Community. Members Only." I parked my rusted-out F-250, a truck that's earned every dent, and walked up the gravel road. The crunch under my work boots should have been the sound of peace, but it was drowned out by the roar of a white Range Rover pulling up like I was roadkill. Out stepped the queen of Aspen Rise, Serafina Vane, blonde bob sharp enough to cut plate glass, a clipboard clutched like a weapon, and an overpowering cloud of designer perfume that choked the crisp pine air. She didn't smile, not really. It was more of a predatory, calculating sneer. Well, she clipped, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. The hermit returns. "This is private property now, Mr. Thorne, isn't it? You are trespassing." I kept my voice dead calm. "You learn patience working on a rig that's one mistake away from killing you." "Ma'am," I said, pointing up the trail, "that's my cabin up there. My family's owned this land, all 320 acres, since 1923. Her smile froze into pure ice. "Not anymore, it isn't. The Thorne property was absorbed into the Aspen Rise Collective 18 months ago. You have 47 separate, egregious violations. Non-compliant roof color, unauthorized outbuildings. That would be my great-grandfather's root cellar, by the way, and landscaping violations because apparently God's own wild sage isn't on their approved plant list." She handed me a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. Total fines, $73,500. $500 a day until compliance. That night, boiling coffee on my old kerosene stove, because my power was suddenly out, I drove to the county seat. I knew, deep down, this was harassment, but I needed facts. I caught Martha Marty Rourke, the county clerk, locking up. She's seen more than one generation of Thorns come and go. Marty's smile was all genuine warmth and sympathy for Mom, but her face turned stone-cold serious when I asked about the HOA filings. "A lot of politics around that development, Caleb," she whispered. Sarah Vane rushed those documents through faster than a greased pig at a county fair. I spent hours poring over the covenants. Page after page of legal jargon giving Sarah Vane totalitarian power over everything from mailbox size to the color of my own morning stubble, probably. But then the lightning strike moment. I found the signature page. And guess whose name was nowhere on the document? Mine. Knowledge nugget. In Montana, HOA covenants require unanimous consent from all affected property owners to be legally binding. I drove back under a sky clearer than any legal situation I'd ever faced, but one question burned in my mind. How could a brand new HOA claim authority over a century-old homestead they legally couldn't touch? A few days later, the suburban invasion force arrived. Sarah's white Range Rover leading 2 black BMW SUVs packed with middle-aged specimens clutching clipboards. They called it a mandatory architectural compliance inspection. I stayed planted in my chair on the porch, savoring my real, honest-to-God coffee. "We have full authority to inspect all properties for covenant compliance," Seraph announced, waving a document like a magic wand. "Section 4.7 of the Community Bylaws. Her little committee started clicking cameras. My truck, my woodpile, my very existence. I stood up, slow and easy. "Ma'am," I said, "this is private property. You weren't invited, and you sure as hell don't have permission to turn my home into your personal photo shoot." Sarah's smile turned shark-like. "Actually, we do. Section 4.7 clearly states." Section 4.7 of covenants I never signed. I cut her off. Documents that don't apply to property that was never legally included. "Now, I'm asking you politely once to get off my land, or I call the sheriff." Her face went from Dallas pale to lobster red. She herded her committee back toward their vehicles, but rolled down her window for the parting shot. "You'll regret this attitude, Thorne. We have ways of dealing with troublemakers who don't respect community standards." The next morning, it was bureaucratic blitzkrieg. 14 new violation notices. My great-grandfather's outhouse, a charming historical feature, was now an unpermitted structure. My F-250 was improper vehicle storage. And my personal favorite, a $500 fine for a splitting maul and stack of firewood, categorized as unauthorized outdoor equipment storage. These people were finding me for the tools that kept my family alive during the Depression. But while sorting through their paper cuts, I noticed something. The metadata on their violation photos showed timestamps from 3 days before their supposed inspection. These clowns had been trespassing all week, documenting me from the woods, planning their assault. Time for my counterpunch. I drove out and bought 6 trail cameras with night vision and audio recording. Montana is a one-party consent state, and this is my property. Every word spoken here belongs to me. Within 48 hours, I struck gold. The cameras caught Seraph and 2 associates creeping around at dawn like discount ninjas. The audio quality was restaurant clear. Seraph's voice. "We need documentation of every possible violation. The more we stack up, the faster we can pressure him into selling." Then, a committee member. "What about environmental violations? Could we claim his septic system is contaminating the creek?" "Brilliant," Seraph purred. "I'll call county health tomorrow." Emergency contamination concerns always get immediate response. 2 days later, the circus arrived. County health, building inspector, state environmental, and a local news crew. Sarah Vane was there, too, wearing a concerned citizen mask for the cameras. She'd orchestrated the whole spectacle to publicly humiliate me. I let them inspect everything. And everything, the septic system, the cabin's granite and steel foundation, was cleaner and stronger than any modern building. Whoever reported contamination was either grossly misinformed or deliberately lying. The state environmental officer, Rodriguez, told me. That's when I made my move. I walked over to the reporter who was interviewing Seraph. "Excuse me," I interrupted politely. "I'm Caleb Thorne, the property owner. Since you're here, I'd like to share something with your viewers." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot from my trail cameras. "I'd like them to know that the person who just gave you that interview has been trespassing on my property for weeks, photographing my home illegally, and I have video evidence of her discussing filing false reports with county agencies." Seraph's face went white, then scarlet. You can't. This is harassment." The reporter, young and eager, was suddenly very, very interested. The story had just flipped from an environmental disaster to a criminal conspiracy. Later that evening, reading by the dim light of my emergency lantern, because, yes, my power was still disconnected pending HOA approval, a certified letter arrived. A colossal lawsuit from Ashworth, Vane, and Associates, Rex Sterling Vane's firm. $250,000 in damages. The subtext: hire expensive lawyers or get steamrolled. As I was absorbing this, I heard movement on the gravel outside. My trail cameras had night vision, but I didn't need electronics to smell the gasoline. 3 figures in dark clothes, ski masks, carrying spray cans, and a bag of road flares. They were trying to burn down the cabin. I stepped onto the porch with a flashlight and Grandpa Silas's old lever-action rifle. Not pointing it, just making sure it was visible. "Evening, folks," I said, my voice dead calm. "Beautiful night for a walk, isn't it? I'm going to count to 10. Then I call the sheriff. You might want to consider whether whatever you're getting paid is worth felony arson charges. They dropped their supplies and ran like hell. They left behind a gasoline can, 3 spray paint cans, and road flares. Enough evidence to stock a fireworks stand and send Sheriff Vane to prison. The sheriff, Martinez, arrived, looking tired but serious. "Son, you just gave me enough evidence to arrest someone for attempted arson, conspiracy, and probably RICO charges if we can prove who hired them. But I wasn't done playing defense. I was done reacting. It was time for chess. It was time to find a lawyer who didn't play checkers." 3 days later, I was sitting across from Elena Vance, a property rights attorney in Helena. Her office smelled like old law books and strong, honest coffee, the kind of place where real work, not billable hours, gets done. "Mr. Thorne," she said, spreading out the documents like a general planning a battle. "You're not going to believe what my research team found." She slid over a folder labeled Thorne Mineral Rights Historical Analysis. The first document was my great-grandfather's 1923 homestead patent. "Your great-grandfather didn't just homestead 320 acres, Elena said, a grin slowly spreading across her face. According to federal records, he filed claims on mineral rights covering 1,280 acres. The entire valley floor, plus the surrounding ridge lines." I just stared. "The whole valley." "Here's where it gets interesting," she continued. "When your family sold off parcels in the 70s and 80s, the deeds transferred surface rights only. The mineral rights stayed with the original homestead patent, which means, Caleb, you own the mineral rights under every single mansion in the Aspen Rise Collective." The implications hit me like a physical blow. But Elena wasn't finished. Under federal mining law, mineral rights include reasonable surface access for extraction activities. And, she paused dramatically, a geological survey from the 1980s shows the valley sits on top of significant deposits of rare earth elements. Value estimate? $50 million to $200 million. I leaned back, trying to process being a victim of fraud one moment and a millionaire the next. "So, Sarah Vane has been threatening to steal a cabin that sits on top of mineral rights worth more than her entire development." "Exactly. And every single building permit issued for those mansions should have required notification of mineral rights holders. That's federal law. None of their permits included that notification, which means, Caleb, their entire development is built on illegally issued permits." Elena looked me straight in the eye. "What you have here isn't just an HOA dispute. This is organized fraud, racketeering, and federal crimes involving mail fraud, wire fraud, and violation of federal mining laws. I contacted the Federal Task Force investigating property fraud schemes. Agent Reeves at the FBI is very interested in talking to you." The gloves were off. We were no longer defending a cabin. We were prosecuting a criminal enterprise. Elena assembled her dream team, a former FBI agent turned PI, a financial crime specialist, and an environmental attorney. They started tracing Sheriff Vane's pattern of fraud across 6 states, shell company purchases, bribery of local officials like Commissioner Dale Huxford, HOA harassment campaigns, and forced below-market sales. Our strategy was ruthless and two-pronged. Civil. File a massive RICO lawsuit seeking treble damages, $40 million plus, an emergency injunction to freeze all HOA enforcement activities immediately. Criminal. Hand over all the evidence, the trail camera footage, the arson attempt evidence, the financial records, to the FBI and EPA to build the criminal case. 2 weeks later, I was watching the sunrise when the silence was broken by the sound of federal helicopters. Black, serious, circling the valley like mechanical vultures. By 8 a.m., the Aspen Rise Collective looked like a federal crime scene. FBI vehicles, IRS vans, EPA enforcement trucks. My phone blew up with texts from neighbors. "Holy smokes, Caleb, what did you do?" "FBI just arrested Seraph at her house." The sweetest message came from Marty, the county clerk. "Caleb, Commissioner Dale Huxford just got perp walked out of the courthouse in federal handcuffs. Turns out, Jake, our PI, found a paper trail on the bribes." Seraph Vane, in full meltdown mode, was calling in bomb threats and try to file a $100 million delusional lawsuit against me and the FBI. She was arrested at Denver International Airport trying to board a private jet with suitcases full of cash, gold, and bearer bonds. Money laundering, attempting to flee prosecution. The charges just kept piling up. Her private military contractors, hired for asset protection, were later raided and charged with running weapons to cartels in Mexico. My HOA dispute had somehow helped bust an international arms trafficking ring. The final confrontation came not in a gunfight, but in a quiet courtroom in Denver. Sarah Vane sat at the defense table, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking like a broken woman. Gone was the perfectly coiffed HOA queen. In her place was a hollow shell. Judge Williams, her voice cutting like ice, delivered the sentence. Mrs. Vane, you stand convicted of operating a criminal enterprise that defrauded families of over $23 million. You used homeowner associations as weapons to terrorize your neighbors, corrupted public officials, and showed no remorse. The hammer dropped. 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, plus restitution in the amount of $69 million. Treble damages under federal racketeering statutes. As federal marshals escorted her out, Sarah turned back toward the gallery, her eyes wild, until they locked on mine. "This isn't over, Thorne," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "You think you won, but you've destroyed everything." The courtroom doors slammed shut behind her, leaving only the echo of her breakdown and the satisfying click of camera shutters. But the real victory wasn't Seraph's downfall. It was what came next. The federal asset forfeiture turned into the largest victim compensation fund in Montana history. Every family got their money back. The HOA was dissolved and reformed into a voluntary association with transparency and rotating leadership. The poisoned land was healed. The ultimate poetic justice? My family's land, my legacy, is now paying for good. We established the Mountain Veterans Retreat Program, funded entirely by Seraph's seized assets. Every month, combat veterans dealing with trauma spend a week at the cabin learning wilderness survival and the art of being usefully self-reliant. Sarah Vane, the woman who spent 25 years ordering people around, is spending her days washing other inmates' clothes in the federal laundry facility. Meanwhile, my story, the fight for property rights, has sparked a movement. Federal lawmakers are even considering the Thorne Act, which would require mineral rights notification for all development projects and establish federal oversight of HOA finances. The valley is quiet tonight. Just the wind through the pine trees, the creek running over the rocks, and the sound of my phone buzzing. It's a message from a combat vet in Oregon, asking for advice about an HOA trying to force him off his land. I pour myself a cup of coffee, fire up the laptop, and start typing a response. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that bullies only win when good people stay isolated and afraid. Justice, mountain style, was served. But the fight for property rights is bigger than one corrupt HOA queen. What do you think? Was 25 years and $69 million in restitution enough for the pain she caused? Have you ever had a moment where you had to dig deep, maybe deeper than you thought possible, to protect your home and your peace? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's make sure the Thorne Act gets passed and no one else has to fight this battle alone. Like and subscribe if you want more stories about the little guy actually winning. Case closed.